Great
this
thing,
bigger in life Americana kind of deal, and then obviously, he gets caught on tape, saying some derogatory, racist things. And
The Undertaker has never been one to cause drama, but when he finally broke his silence on Hulk Hogan, even die-hard WWE fans were stunned. In a rare, unfiltered revelation, the dead man exposed the real reason he believes Hogan should have been banned from WWE altogether, and it's darker and more personal than anyone imagined. Undertaker's take on Hogan's fall from grace. When the wrestling world learned of Hulk Hogan's passing on July 24, 2025, tributes poured in from across the industry. Legends, current superstars, and fans alike mourned the loss of arguably the most recognizable figure professional wrestling has ever produced. But amid the outpouring of grief and celebration of Hogan's accomplishments, one voice stood out for its measured, almost calculating tone, that of The Undertaker, Mark Calaway himself. The Undertaker's tribute was characteristically brief, posted to Instagram shortly after the news broke. The full text read simply, "The wrestling world has lost a true legend. His contributions to our business are immeasurable, and for that I am appreciative. Thank you, Hulk Hogan." To the casual observer, these words might seem like a standard, respectful acknowledgement of a fallen peer, but to those who followed the complex, often contentious relationship between these two titans of the squared circle, the statement carried weight far beyond its simple phrasing. What The Undertaker didn't say spoke volumes. There were no personal anecdotes, no warm memories of time spent together, no emotional declarations of brotherhood that characterize so many other tributes. Ric Flair, by contrast, wrote extensively about Hogan visiting him in the hospital when Flair had a mere 2% chance of survival, about Hogan lending him money when his son Reed was sick, calling him an incredible athlete, talent, friend, and father whose friendship meant the world to him. The Undertaker's tribute was professional, distant, almost perfunctory, and perhaps that's exactly what it needed to be, because the history between these two men, both in and out of the ring, tells a story of friction, frustration, and fundamental disagreement about what it means to be a professional wrestler. But it was in the aftermath of Hogan's death, when The Undertaker felt comfortable speaking more candidly, that the real depth of his feelings became clear. When Hulk Hogan stepped onto the stage at WWE Raw's Netflix debut on January 6, 2025, something unprecedented happened in the world of professional wrestling. The 18,000 strong crowd at the Intuit Dome in Inglewood, California, didn't erupt in cheers for the legendary Hulkamania icon. Instead, they unleashed a torrent of boos so loud, so sustained, that it drowned out everything Hogan tried to say about his real American beer brand. This wasn't just a bad night for a wrestling legend. It was a crystallization of years of controversy, broken trust, and unresolved scandals that had finally caught up with one of wrestling's biggest names. But perhaps no one's reaction to that moment was more telling than that of The Undertaker, Mark Calaway, a man who has his own complicated history with Hogan stretching back over 3 decades. When Taker addressed the incident on his 6 Feet Under podcast on February 3rd, 2025, his words carried the weight of someone who had witnessed Hogan's rise, his reign, and now his reckoning. And what he had to say wasn't pretty.
man, I got feelings. I got feelings for people. Like, sometimes in life, things come back.
This wasn't the compassionate Undertaker offering sympathy to a fallen colleague. This was something far more pointed, a suggestion that karma had finally arrived at Hogan's doorstep. And as Undertaker elaborated on his podcast, co-hosted with guest Justin "The Body Donut," the layers of this complicated relationship began to unfold in ways that revealed not just personal tension, but a fundamental reckoning with what Hulk Hogan represented in professional wrestling. The immediate backstage reaction to Hogan's booing was, according to Undertaker, telling in its own right.
When I saw him, he was no-selling it and pushing his beer. I didn't see him. I wasn't backstage when he came.
That word, no selling, carries particular significance in wrestling parlance. It refers to when a wrestler refuses to acknowledge or react to an opponent's moves, essentially breaking the illusion of the match. That Undertaker would use this term to describe Hogan's reaction to the crowd's rejection was no accident. It was a callback to one of the most infamous incidents in their shared history, and it suggested that even after all these years, Hogan was still playing the same game, refusing to acknowledge reality when it didn't suit his narrative. When the podcast host pressed Undertaker on whether he felt sympathy for Hogan, whether he wanted to give him a hug after such public humiliation, the dead man's response was unequivocal.
Did you feel bad for him? No.
Well, hey man, I got feelings. I got feelings for people. Like, sometimes in life, things come back.
But it was what came next that really cut to the heart of the matter. Undertaker didn't just dismiss Hogan's suffering, he contextualized it within a broader pattern of behavior that had alienated fans, fellow wrestlers, and ultimately damaged the business itself.
Hogan has this great thing,
bigger in life Americana kind of deal, and then obviously, you know, he gets caught on tape, you know, saying some derogatory, racist things, and you know, in this day and age where all of that is such a hot button deal, like I don't know what you expect. Like,
I think
people
also,
are gonna, you know, they're gonna react, and they're not gonna react in a positive way.
This was a direct reference to the 2015 scandal that had shattered Hogan's carefully cultivated image. A leaked audio recording from a 2007 sex tape revealed Hogan using racial slurs, including the N-word, while discussing his daughter Brooke's dating life. He expressed discomfort about her reportedly dating a black man and stated, "I am a racist to a point." The fallout was immediate and severe. WWE terminated Hogan's contract and removed him from their Hall of Fame in July 2015. But Undertaker's criticism went deeper than just the racism scandal. He pointed to a phenomenon that modern wrestling fans understand all too well: the erosion of kayfabe, the protective wall between the scripted world of wrestling and reality.
And the fan, they have access now to everything, and they do. And then they get to hear people's interviews, and so yeah, they kind of feel like they're part of that locker room. And this was somebody that was, you know, regardless of where he's at now, you know, they kind of carry a grudge about it.
This observation cut to something profound about Hogan's downfall. In the old days of wrestling, performers could maintain their mystique, could keep their personal failings hidden behind carefully managed public personas. But in the age of podcasts, shoot interviews, social media, and 24/7 news cycles, fans now knew the real Terry Bollea, not just the Hulk Hogan character, and they didn't like what they saw. And Undertaker, the contrast between Hogan's reception and Undertaker's own warm welcome that same night wasn't lost on observers. While Hogan was booed mercilessly, Undertaker entered to his American Badass theme and received massive cheers. Both men are politically conservative, both supported Donald Trump, yet the crowd's reaction to each couldn't have been more different. What did that say about the nature of their respective legacies? O'Shea Jackson Jr., Ice Cube's son, and Eric Andre, who were in the crowd that night, later explained their booing as a stand against racism. Jackson tweeted, "The racism, bro. It's just hard to forget how detailed that rant was. What'd you think was going to happen?" This crystallized what many felt, that Hogan's transgression wasn't just a mistake, but a window into deeply held beliefs that couldn't be easily forgiven or forgotten. Undertaker's response to all this revealed something important about his own moral framework. He didn't hide behind false sympathy or corporate speak. He acknowledged reality.
You know, he's come back before. Since all of the stuff with his, you know, with his daughter and all the racial stuff and all that, and he's came back and he's got positive reactions.
This observation underscored that the Netflix booing wasn't just about old scandals. It was about accumulated grievances, about a pattern of behavior that had exhausted public patience. Hogan had been reinstated into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2018 after attempts at redemption, including apologizing and working with young people. But those efforts clearly hadn't been enough to repair the damage. The podcast segment, which quickly went viral with millions of views across platforms, reignited debates about accountability, redemption, and whether some actions should permanently bar someone from the spotlight. When celebrities like Jackson and Andre stood up in the crowd to boo, when wrestlers like Seth Rollins said on Good Morning Football, "I am all for people getting what they deserve," they were making a statement about standards and consequences. But Undertaker's perspective added another dimension to this conversation, one rooted in decades of personal experience with Hogan, both in and out of the ring. His laughter at Hogan's discomfort wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. It was the reaction of someone who had watched this man's ego and politics harm the business and the people in it for years. And as we'll see in the next section, the roots of Undertaker's animosity toward Hogan run deep, stretching back to one of the most controversial moments in their shared history, when Hogan no-sold the future. To understand why The Undertaker laughed at Hulk Hogan's 2025 humiliation, you have to go back to November 27, 1991, Survivor Series at the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, Michigan.
My 1-year anniversary with the company, I wrestled none other than the Golden Goose himself. The star, the moneymaker, the big dude. I'm going to go over. I'm going to win the championship. I'm walking down the hall, just going to my locker room. He goes, "Hey, brother, can I talk to you?"
This was the night that should have launched The Undertaker into the stratosphere. Instead, it became a masterclass in how a top star can sabotage a rising talent for the sake of his own ego. And it created a wound that would never fully heal. The setup was perfect on paper. The Undertaker, only 1 year into his gimmick, would challenge Hulk Hogan for the WWF Championship in the event's first ever singles main event. The storyline pitted Hogan's heroic Hulkamania against Undertaker's supernatural menace in what was billed as the gravest challenge. The finish was controversial, but designed to protect both men. Ric Flair would interfere by slipping Undertaker a chair, and Undertaker would tombstone Hogan onto it for the pin, winning the title and shocking the world.
I'm really nervous about taking the tombstone. I got this bad neck. I was like, look, I promise you, I'll take great care of you. Don't worry about it. So we get into the match, and now it's time for the finish. Finish is where I'm going to tombstone him on a chair.
But what happened backstage would poison the relationship between these two men forever. According to multiple sources and Undertaker's own recollections, Hogan allegedly no-sold several of Undertaker's moves during the match, making it appear to the crowd and commentators that Undertaker had botched and injured him.
I've given my kids rougher bumps than I give Hogan. I wrap him up. I've got him. The chair comes down. Boom. As soon as my knees touch. Oh, brother, you got me. I'm like, oh, I just crippled the golden goose. I just hurt Hogan.
This wasn't just unprofessional. It was potentially career-ending for a young talent. Hogan reportedly yelled about the pain and even threatened to have someone call his wife and kids, escalating it to a deeply personal level that left Undertaker mortified. The consequences of this moment extended far beyond one match. Undertaker later called this a disgraceful moment that made him mortified, viewing it as Hogan protecting his aura at the expense of a rising star's credibility. Imagine being in Undertaker's position. You've worked for a year to build this character. You're finally getting your shot at the top, and the biggest star in the company is actively working to undermine you because he's afraid of looking weak. The story gets even more revealing when you examine what happened after the match. Undertaker, understandably concerned that he had actually injured wrestling's biggest star, went back to check on Hogan. What he found changed his entire perspective on the man. A YouTube short captures Undertaker recounting this moment.
So I'm walking back. I get backstage. I was like, where's Hogan? He's in Vince's office. Hogan's laid on the floor. So I'm going over to check on him and apologize and everything else. It took a few days before I actually got to see the footage. His head never touched.
Let that sink in. Undertaker had performed the move perfectly. Hogan's head was safely a foot from the mat, yet Hogan claimed injury anyway. When Undertaker confronted him about it later, Hogan claimed the injury was due to Undertaker squeezing his legs during the move, which Undertaker found implausible and insulting. This incident didn't just damage trust between two performers, it revealed something fundamental about Hogan's character and his approach to the business. But the 1991 incident was just the beginning of a pattern that would play out repeatedly throughout Hogan's career. Hogan's reputation as a politician, someone who manipulated bookings for his own benefit, directly clashed with Undertaker's locker room leadership style. During the lead-up to this Tuesday in Texas in December 1991, Hogan pushed for a clean win to reclaim the title, which he got after chaos involving Paul Bearer's urn. Undertaker saw this as Hogan pulling strings via Vince McMahon, a pattern that would irritate many of Hogan's peers over the years. In a 2020 ESPN interview, Undertaker revealed his honest opinion. Hogan was talented but unreliable, often flaking on commitments or demanding top billing in ways that stifled creativity and hurt the business as a whole. This pattern of behavior extended far beyond Undertaker. When you look at the list of wrestlers who have publicly criticized or expressed animosity toward Hogan, it reads like a who's who of wrestling royalty. Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Randy Savage, CM Punk, Scott Steiner, and many others. The common threads in their complaints: Hogan's ego, his backstage politics, his refusal to put other talent over, and his tendency to manipulate situations for his own benefit. Bret Hart's animosity toward Hogan was particularly intense. At WrestleMania 9 in 1993, Hart lost the WWF Championship to Yokozuna, only for Hogan to win it immediately after in an impromptu match. Hart was led to believe Hogan would drop the title to him later at King of the Ring, but Hogan instead lost it back to Yokozuna, refusing to put Hart over. Hart reportedly told Hogan, "You're not in my league. On behalf of myself, my family, and most of the boys in the dressing room, you can go f*** yourself." Hart's critiques of Hogan's in-ring abilities were equally scathing. He called Hogan very limited and said in 2021 that Hogan didn't know a headlock from a headlamp. When asked directly in a fan, "Do I like Hulk Hogan?" "No, I don't," Hart replied without hesitation. He viewed Hogan as selfish and a manipulative backstage politician who damaged damaged others' careers to maintain his position at the top. The tension between Shawn Michaels and Hogan culminated during their 2005 SummerSlam match, a dream matchup that turned sour due to creative disagreements. Michaels claims they agreed to a best-of-3 series, with Hogan winning the first match and Michaels winning a rematch. However, Hogan allegedly used his influence to cancel the rematch, ensuring he went over. Frustrated, Michaels oversold Hogan's offense in a comedic, exaggerated manner during the match to mock him, a moment that became legendary in wrestling lore. Even Randy Macho Man Savage, Hogan's former friend and tag team partner, reportedly harbored deep resentment. Their on-screen feud over Miss Elizabeth, Savage's wife, mirrored personal tensions. Savage reportedly believed Hogan crossed boundaries involving Elizabeth, leading to years of animosity. An urban legend suggests Savage punched Hogan before WrestleMania 9, causing a black eye, though Hogan claimed it was a jet ski accident. Before Savage's death in 2011, Hogan claimed they reconciled at a doctor's office in Tampa, Florida, and resumed communication. However, Matt Osborne, Doink the Clown, disputed this, claiming Savage hated Hogan until his death, and that Hogan's induction of Savage into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2015 was inappropriate. Perhaps most damning of all was CM Punk's assessment. When asked about Hogan during an interview, Punk didn't mince words.
I think Hogan's a piece of shit, so obviously I'm going to be like Steve Austin, yay.
He elaborated on this sentiment in other interviews, calling Hogan a toxic presence in wrestling locker rooms despite never working directly with him. In a Windy City Live interview, Punk said, "I wasn't a Hogan guy. I've met him. I like him even less now," followed by strong expletives. The pattern is clear. Hogan's ego and backstage maneuvering left a trail of damaged relationships and bitter colleagues throughout his career. And nowhere was this more evident than in his time with WCW, where his creative control and influence would help sink an entire company. How ego killed a company. If the 1991 Survivor Series represented Hulk Hogan's willingness to damage individual careers for his benefit, his time in WCW demonstrated how that same ego could contribute to destroying an entire wrestling promotion. And perhaps no one saw this more clearly than Ric Flair, whose complex relationship with Hogan spanned both professional rivalry and personal friendship, though that friendship would be tested repeatedly by Hogan's behavior. When Hogan joined WCW in 1994, he was granted significant creative control that would prove catastrophic for the company. This control allowed him to influence match outcomes, storylines, and booking decisions in ways that consistently favored his own image over the company's long-term health. The most infamous example came at Bash at the Beach 2000, where Hogan was involved in a dispute with head of creative booking Vince Russo. During the event, Hogan was scheduled to face Sting for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship, but arrived in street clothes, laid down for the pin, and left the ring, refusing to lose as scripted. Russo responded with a shoot promo, publicly criticizing Hogan in a way that violated Hogan's contract clause, leading to a lawsuit against WCW. This incident contributed to WCW's financial struggles and its eventual sale to WWE at a reduced price. Flair, who had his own complicated history with Hogan, witnessed much of this destruction firsthand. In a revealing moment from January 18, 1999 on WCW Nitro, Flair delivered a promo that cut to the heart of his frustration with Hogan's promo, delivered with Flair's characteristic intensity, encapsulated years of professional frustration. Flair wasn't just cutting a wrestling promo. He was voicing legitimate grievances about how Hogan's celebrity status and backstage politics had marginalized genuinely talented wrestlers who could work circles around him in the ring. Flair's criticism of Hogan extended to his reception in the South during WCW. In a 2022 interview on his podcast, To Be the Man,
No, it's because they just wouldn't. We used to have put sound bites in. He won't be upset that I'm saying this. We had to put sound bites in at center stage because they booed him out.
This revealed something fundamental about Hogan's appeal. It was regional and demographic specific. Southern wrestling fans who preferred technical, hard-hitting matches never fully bought into Hogan's theatrical superhero persona the way Northern audiences had. But Flair's most recurring criticism involved Hogan's refusal to job to him and others. After Hogan joined WCW in 1994, Flair feuded with him extensively, losing the WCW World Heavyweight Championship to Hogan at Bash at the Beach. A 3-match series was planned. Hogan wins first, Flair wins second, Hogan regains the title third. However, after the first match, Hogan invoked his creative control clause to refuse the loss to Flair, claiming fans weren't ready for him to drop the belt. Flair finally pinned Hogan cleanly at Uncensored 1999, but under controversial circumstances involving a fast count. In various shoot interviews over the years, Flair has been blunt about Hogan's motivations. Hulk used his control to stay on top. He refused to job when it was planned. The frustration extended beyond just Flair. Eric Bischoff, Bischoff, despite his close professional and personal relationship with Hogan, acknowledged tensions over creative control disputes. Incidents like Starrcade 1997, where Hogan allegedly refused to lose cleanly to Sting, became emblematic of how Hogan's ego interfered with storytelling. Bischoff has admitted that Hogan disliked working with younger talent like Billy Kidman, which caused friction and limited opportunities for rising stars. In a revealing podcast segment, Bischoff discussed the business realities of bringing Hogan to WCW.
Hulk was the opposite. He was very open, very honest. However, he had an attorney by the name of Henry Holmes, who was a animal. He's just an animal. And that part was very, very difficult. That being said, they were very clear right from the very beginning. Here's what this deal has to look like. These are our parameters. And there wasn't a lot of room for negotiation.
This revealed something important. Hogan's business acumen and negotiating power were formidable, and he knew how to leverage his position to extract maximum value, both financially and in terms of creative control. Bischoff explained that bringing Hogan in was critical because Ted Turner was very committed, made sure that I had the resources that I need to make the deal happen. But as Bischoff also acknowledged, this deal came with strings attached.
If you've got a big star, that big star has a certain amount of influence. And Hulk had influence. So a lot of those names I brought in to kind of keep the big star happy, because Hulk felt comfortable with that group of people around him.
This influence led to Hogan bringing in his friends, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Honky Tonk Man, the Nasty Boys, Brutus Beefcake, many of whom were past their prime. While some had value, others didn't, and their presence often blocked opportunities for younger, more talented performers. Bischoff admitted that Hogan felt comfortable with that group of people around him, and keeping the big star happy sometimes meant making questionable roster decisions. Perhaps the most telling example of Hogan's influence came when Steve Austin pitched an idea to Eric Bischoff.
And Steve Austin came up to me, and this was right after Hulk Hogan got there. He said, "Eric, I got this great idea. I'm going to be Hulk Hogan's little brother. We can be a tag team, and then I'll turn on him," or something like that. I went, wow. But I wasn't the head of creative at the time. I said, well, let me pass that on, and we'll see where that goes. Now, I knew in my mind...
Bischoff knew immediately that Hogan would never agree to work with Austin. When the decision was made to have Austin drop the U.S. title to Hacksaw Jim Duggan, it was reportedly the tipping point for Steve Austin in WCW. Austin has been vocal about his displeasure with that booking decision, and it's not hard to see why. He was being passed over for a nostalgia act while one of the biggest stars in the company refused to even consider working with him. This pattern of behavior, refusing to work with younger talent, manipulating bookings to maintain his position, prioritizing his own image over company health, would ultimately contribute to WCW's downfall. When the company was sold to WWE in 2001, many blamed the mismanagement, the bloated contracts, and the creative chaos that Hogan's influence had helped create. But perhaps the most damning indictment of Hogan's legacy came from the very people who had once idolized him. Jesse Ventura's animosity toward Hogan stemmed from an incident in the 1980s when Ventura attempted to unionize WWE wrestlers to improve working conditions. Hogan reportedly informed WWE owner Vince McMahon of Ventura's plans, leading to the effort being shut down. Ventura learned of Hogan's betrayal during a sworn deposition and has held a grudge ever since, viewing Hogan as someone who prioritized his relationship with management over collective wrestler welfare. Even Scott Steiner became one of Hogan's most vocal critics, calling him a cancer in wrestling and accusing him of manipulating creative decisions to bury younger talent. A 2015 incident where Steiner confronted Hogan's wife, Jennifer, over Hogan inducting Randy Savage into the WWE Hall of Fame led to a police report and Steiner's ban from the event. After Hogan's racist remarks surfaced, Steiner called him a piece of shit on X, suggesting karmic retribution. The 2015 racism scandal only amplified existing resentments. MVP labeled Hogan a racist due to the leaked audio stating he holds no love for Hogan. When Hogan was reinstated into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2018, The New Day issued a joint statement saying Hogan didn't represent their values and chose not to interact with him. All of this context makes The Undertaker's 2025 reaction to Hogan's booing not just understandable, but almost inevitable. When Undertaker laughed at Hogan's discomfort when he said, "Sometimes in life things come back," he was speaking for an entire generation of wrestlers who had watched Hogan's ego damage careers, poison locker rooms, and ultimately tarnish his own legacy beyond repair. The final chapter of this story came with Hulk Hogan's death on July 24, 2025, at age 71. The wrestling world's response was mixed. Some, like Ric Flair called Hogan an incredible athlete, talent, friend, and father, praising his contributions despite their complicated history. Others maintained their silence or offered measured condolences that carefully avoided whitewashing his controversies. The Undertaker's 2025 Instagram post called Hogan's contributions immeasurable, a professional acknowledgement of Hogan's impact on the business, even as their personal history remained unresolved. This encapsulated the complex legacy Hogan left behind, undeniably important to wrestling's mainstream success, yet deeply flawed in ways that hurt the people around him and the industry he helped build. The lesson in all of this isn't just about one man's failings. It's about how ego, unchecked power, and the inability to put others over, both literally and figuratively, can corrupt even the most successful careers. Hogan's refusal to lose cleanly to Ric Flair, his manipulation of Steve Austin's career, his betrayal of Undertaker in 1991, his sabotage of Jesse Ventura's union efforts, these weren't isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a mindset that valued personal glory over collective success. And when that mindset was exposed through the 2015 racism scandal, when the carefully constructed facade of Hulkamania crumbled to reveal the deeply flawed Terry Bollea beneath, the wrestling world finally had to reckon with a truth many had known privately for decades. Hulk Hogan was great for business, but terrible to the people who made that business possible. The 18,000 fans who booed Hogan in Los Angeles in January 2025 weren't just reacting to old scandals. They were rendering a verdict on a lifetime of choices. And when the Undertaker laughed at that moment, when he refused to offer false sympathy, he was simply acknowledging what everyone else already knew. Sometimes in life, things really do come back. And sometimes that's exactly what needs to happen. Like this video? Click on the card showing on your screen for more.